Don't go anywhere. Jason's voice cracked, his grip tight on Emily's hand. Outside, a gentle Boston rain was misting the streets, a quiet percussion against the frantic drumbeat in his chest. Emily just stared ahead, her eyes distant, a landscape of quiet sorrow, offering no words. Jason was acutely aware of his every breath, the thudding of his heart, and the cold certainty that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. But the shared umbrella wasn't quite enough. Little specks of cold water clinging to their shoulders. Emily shivered subtly, and Jason wanted to speak, to offer some empty comfort, but the words withered in his throat. They stood there, suspended in a heavy silence, as if the world outside had suddenly slowed down, leaving only the steady patter of the rain and their quick, shallow breathing. Jason searched her eyes, probing for a flicker of recognition, a sign of softening or shared misery, but found only an echoing void. A cold, alien fear snaked into his heart, the fear of losing her, of watching everything dissolve in this sudden, unpredictable moment. And the question hammered in his mind, one he didn't dare voice: can we come back from this? Emily let out a faint, weary sigh. Her voice was a bare whisper, barely audible over the rain. Jason, this isn't going to be as simple as you think. Lorraine seemed to underline every syllable, making the space between them heavier, more charged. A sharp, familiar ache twisted in Jason's chest, yet he held her hand tighter, a desperate, anchoring connection, believing that if he could just hold on to her now, they still had a fighting chance. They moved slowly down the slick sidewalk, their steps measured, rhythmic and taut with unspoken tension. Streetlights fractured and reflected on the wet pavement, creating shimmering, beautiful yet utterly cold patterns. Jason longed to pull her into his arms, to tell her that everything would work itself out, but he knew any reassurance would be hollow unless she was ready to accept it. A sudden gust of wind whipped down the narrow street, making Emily hunch her shoulders, and Jason instinctively squeezed her hand harder. Why did it come to this? Jason muttered a sup. Emily offered no reply, only raising a free hand to wipe away a stray tear and the clinging moisture of the rain. In that small gesture, Jason understood. The challenge ahead wasn't just the physical storm outside, but the far more destructive emotional one raging between them. They paused in front of their usual coffee shop, the place where they had spent countless afternoons laughing over stale jokes, the quiet sanctuary that held their simplest, dearest memories. Jason stared into the rain-streaked, steamed-up window, their reflections flickering and distorted. He silently pleaded with her to give them, this one chance not to lose everything. But beneath the hope, the anxiety was a raw, throbbing presence. One single moment, and it could all vanish. Jason gently guided Emily inside, into the immediate rush of warmth from the heater, a blend of roasted coffee beans and sweet pastry scent. Emily took a deep, deliberate breath, but the lightness never reached her eyes. Jason pulled a napkin from the dispenser and delicately dabbed the moisture from her cheek, watching every minute shift in her expression. Each small frown, each heavy exhalation, weighed him down. He told himself, if we don't fix this now, we'll lose each other forever. Inside the shop, the soft jazz and the clatter of porcelain cups faded into a distant hum. It was just background noise to the storm in his heart. He sat close to Emily, their hands still locked, feeling the pulse beat connecting them. He didn't need words. He just needed her to know that no matter what fire she was walking through, he was right here and he wouldn't let go. Finally, Emily exhaled a breath that sounded like it had been held for days. Her voice trembled as she asked, Jason, do you still want me? After everything? Jason met her gaze and nodded, his eyes unwavering, pledging everything. I'm not leaving you, never. In that critical moment, between the Boston rain and the dimmed cafe light, they both felt the seismic shift. Everything had changed. But there was still a fragile opportunity, a desperate lifeline, if they were both brave enough to reach out and pull it close. Jason held on to Emily's hand as they walked away from the coffee shop. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air remained heavy, damp, and thick with unspoken stress. He led her down a side street where the boutiques were closing, the amber glow of the lamps reflecting in the puddles on the sidewalk. The tension was suffocating, but Jason knew he couldn't let this moment pass without laying his cards on the table. Emily, I know this isn't simple, far from it, but if we don't fight for this, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life, Jason said, his voice shaky, but steeling itself with resolve. Emily stopped abruptly, a crease forming between her brows as she looked at him intently. She took a slow, deep breath, then finally spoke. Jason, you don't get it. Sometimes, I'm terrified of losing you too, but it's not always a clean-cut choice like you make it sound. Jason felt a cold knot tighten in his chest. He exhaled slowly, fighting to maintain a semblance of control, yet her words felt like shards of glass in his gut. He stepped closer, gently placing his hands on her shoulders, looking directly into her eyes that were simultaneously bright with feeling and clouded with apprehension. I don't care about the difficulty, I just want to be with you. That's the only equation that matters to me. Emily turned her face away, the lingering moisture on her cheeks catching the street lamp's light. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I'm scared we won't be strong enough to withstand it. Jason remained silent for a moment, his heart swelling with a mix of pain and fierce determination. He couldn't preach anymore. He knew that right now, action and presence were more powerful than any speech. They continued their slow walk down the street, their hands still tightly clasped, each step a bridge stretching between their past and this agonizing present. Every footfall brought a flood of simple memories. Evenings in Boston Common, shared laughter over terrible jokes in their little cafe, the times they'd fought fiercely only to find their way back to each other, stronger than before. He promised himself, Emily, if there's a sliver of trust left in you, I won't give up. A sudden loud engine roar from the corner startled them both. Jason tensed, his eyes scanning the street, only to see a massive delivery truck rumbling past, splashing water onto the curb. Emily gave a tiny nervous chuckle, leaning her head briefly against his shoulder, and Jason felt his heart melt. That fleeting moment reminded him, despite the tension, they were still them. There was still a chance to weather this storm, together. But just as Jason opened his mouth to speak, his phone vibrated a stark, jarring intrusion. It was a text from his lead developer. Major emergency on the Alpha project. Need you on site now. Jason looked down at the screen, then back at Emily, his face etched with familiar conflict. She recognized the expression instantly. She placed a soft hand over his, a gesture of understanding. Go, I know you have to, but promise me you won't forget us. Jason squeezed her hand once more, took a fortifying breath, and nodded, his commitment solidifying. I'll be back soon. Wait for me. Emily offered a weak smile, but the worry in her eyes remained. Jason turned and hurried toward his car, his chest heavy but his steps decisive. He understood that another tempest was dragging him away, a professional crisis that would now compound the emotional one they were already facing. On the drive to the office, Jason couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He mentally catalogued every small detail. The way she nervously pleated her sleeve when she was stressed, the genuine smile that only appeared when he arrived, the warmth of her hand in his. The memories were both agonizing and galvanizing. A brutal reminder that if he didn't give his all, these precious moments would be lost forever. The moment he stepped into the office, the chaos hit him. Colleagues were huddled around monitors, voices urgent, faces pale with worry. Files were scattered, papers flying, the physical manifestation of a crisis. Jason inhaled deeply, forcing himself to compartmentalize, but his mind kept circling back to Emily. Solve this fast, he commanded himself. She shouldn't have to wait, or worry, for long. As Jason plunged into damage control, the minutes bled into hours, the stress in his heart a constant high-pitched hum. Every time the desk phone rang, he half expected it to be a new disaster, desperately hoping it wasn't bad news from Emily. But through the fire drill of his work life, he knew one thing clearly. Whatever crisis hit them next, this relationship was the one project he would never abandon. Jason slammed the desk phone down, his eyes scanning the chaotic office floor, strained, yet focused. Everything felt ready to explode. Buggy reports, irate clients, panicked developers, and beneath it all, the indelible image of Emily was consuming his thoughts. He knew he had to contain this crisis quickly, or the collateral damage would reach their fragile connection. As Jason was deep diving into the error logs on his screen, a text message from Emily popped up. You okay? Don't forget to breathe. A genuine, if brief, smile touched his lips, a mixture of warmth and anxiety swirling inside him. Just a few words, but enough to re-establish their lifeline, a reminder of her care and the responsibility he felt toward her. But before Jason could reply, his lead architect rushed in, visibly shaking. Jason, the client reporting system just crashed. We have 30 minutes before they notice and react. Jason's jaw tightened, his heart rate spiking. This was the decisive moment, not just for his career, but for his pride and, most importantly, the peace he desperately wanted to return to Emily. In the midst of the escalating crisis, Jason vividly recalled the moments with Emily, the look in her eyes, the smile she forced, despite the rain, her cold hand seeking his warmth. Fast, strong, he drilled into himself. I have to keep this from imploding, so she knows I'm still here. Still the man she can trust. Jason moved through his team, issuing rapid-fire instructions, focusing on every tiny detail to ensure the rollback was flawless. He was standing on the fault line between two worlds, the immediate, screaming chaos of his work life, and the quiet, anxious hope represented by Emily waiting for him. He was not permitted to fail in either. Finally, after nearly an hour of grueling, high-stakes triage, the system stabilized. Jason let out a shaky breath, grabbed his messenger bag, and bolted out the door. Outside, the streets glistened under the city lights, the rain reduced to a whisper on the rooftops. He saw her immediately. Emily was sitting on the low stone wall outside their coffee shop, her coat damp, yet her smile was radiant, her eyes wide with relief and expectation. Jason inhaled sharply, then broke into a run toward her. Emily sprang up, meeting him halfway on the deserted sidewalk. They collided, wrapping their arms around each other, a deep, wordless embrace that released all the pent-up tension of the day. In that charged silence, all their fear and strain dissolved. Jason whispered into her hair, "I'm here now. I'm not leaving you alone." Emily buried her face against his shoulder, her voice choked but infused with deep belief. I knew you would come back." Jason held her tighter, his relief immense, but his resolve even firmer. Whatever looming difficulties lay ahead, they would face them together. But the moment of peace was short. A strange, sharp sound echoed from a nearby alley. Jason's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the shadows, a fresh wave of primal anxiety washing over him. He knew this night was just the opening act, and the real tests were still waiting their turn. Emily tugged gently on his arm, her voice a low, nervous tremor. "Jason, is this really just the beginning?" Jason looked down at her, his gaze both determined and fraught with worry. "Yes, but we face it together." They stood there for a few strained minutes, listening to the soft rain, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of each other's chests, steeling themselves for the unknown. Jason internally braced for impact, knowing that in just a moment, everything could shift again. He had to be prepared to protect Emily, and to protect this fragile relationship. The streets were emptying, the yellow lamps casting long, wavering reflections on the wet asphalt. Jason and Emily walked slowly down the street, their hands woven together. But Jason's mind was already racing ahead, running simulations of their next steps. He knew the next challenge wouldn't be just a job crisis or a storm, but the tough decisions they would have to make together, where emotion and logic would clash head. Jason and Emily walked slowly on the slick street, the yellow lamplight casting long, wavering shadows in the rainwater. A heavy weight still pressed down on Jason, as if the world was demanding an immediate, irrevocable decision. Emily walked beside him, her eyes a mixture of worry and steadfast faith. But Jason sensed her own internal struggle. "Emily, we need to talk. Seriously," Jason sighed, his voice firm yet tinged with tremor. Emily looked up, her gaze cautious and curious. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, her voice low but clear, each word resonating directly in his heart. Jason stopped, grasping her hand tightly, feeling the familiar warmth and a faint, nervous pulse beneath his palm. "About us, about what's happening, and our future. Do you trust me?" Jason looked directly into her eyes, laying bare all the emotions he had been bottling up all day. Emily was silent for a long moment, the only sounds the soft drumming of the rain on a distant awning and the wind whispering through the tree branches. Her heart felt both warm and cold. Are you certain we can weather all of this? Not just the rain, or the job, but the challenges that, maybe, we haven't even seen yet," Emily admitted, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Jason shook his head, his mouth a thin, determined line. "I can't promise certainty for everything, but I can absolutely promise that I will never walk away from you. No matter how big the challenge, we face it together." In that critical, emotionally charged moment, a sharp, loud noise suddenly echoed from a dark alley nearby. The unmistakable sound of shattering glass, followed by hurried footsteps, suggesting someone was lurking, watching. Jason instantly shielded Emily behind him, his eyes locked on the darkness, his heart pounded, adrenaline surging. This wasn't just an emotional challenge anymore, it was a genuine physical threat. Emily gripped his hand fiercely, her voice a terrified whisper. "Jason, we need to get somewhere safe." Jason nodded sharply, pulling her into a nearby side alley where the light was weak and the shadows were deep. He listened intently to every sound, analyzing every footstep. His heart split between raw fear and fierce protectiveness. In the confined space of the alley, They pressed against a damp brick wall. Jason murmured against her ear, "Emily, stay calm. As long as we have each other, we'll be fine." Emily nodded, her eyes wide with terror but fixed on him. The lingering droplets of rain fell onto their shoulders, synchronizing with their racing heartbeats. The footsteps grew closer, forcing Jason to make an immediate decision. He looked at Emily, his voice low and urgent. "We're taking the back way. Follow my lead." They scrambled quickly through the narrow, waterlogged passages, splashing through puddles, the fear and adrenaline mixing into a frantic rhythm that matched their pounding hearts. Finally, they burst through an unmarked door and into the relative safety of an old, dimly lit bookstore that was miraculously still open. Jason hauled Emily inside, breathless, his grip still tight on her hand. The shop was dark but warm, smelling faintly of aged paper and stale coffee. They stood there, safe for the moment, but utterly wired, as if they had just survived a very real, very terrifying storm. Emily leaned into Jason's chest, her voice shaky. We're alive, but that was too dangerous." Jason stroked her hair gently, his breathing gradually steadying. His voice was a low rumble. "I know, and I never want you to be scared like that, but you see, don't you? Only by facing it together do we get stronger." In that moment of quiet recovery, Jason looked deep into Emily's eyes. He knew this trial was far from over. The darkness still lurked outside, the rain hadn't stopped, and they both realized that life wasn't just a series of peaceful moments, but a continuous chain of escalating challenges they had to conquer as a unit. Emily let out a small, settling sigh, placing her hands on his shoulders. I believe you, but if this is going to continue, we really have to be strong." Jason squeezed her hands, his voice resonating with deep commitment. "I promise. I won't let anything break us." But just as they settled near a towering shelf of antique volumes, a fleeting silhouette crossed the window outside, a blurry figure caught in the weak streetlight. Both of them tensed. Jason's expression hardened. "Emily, this storm, it's just getting started." Jason and Emily were still huddled inside the old bookstore, the faint amber light flickering across the towering shelves. Outside, the rain continued its soft drumming, but within the shop, they felt a desperate, temporary silence. Jason's heart still hammered against his ribs, his breath shallow, and he knew this respite was fleeting. Emily looked around, her voice a low, shaky whisper. "Jason, I don't know where today is leading, but everything feels like it's changed too fast." Jason placed a reassuring hand over hers, his eyes grave. "I know, Em, it's not easy, and you'll have to process your own feelings, but I'm here, every step of the way, to face it with you." But at that precise moment, Jason's phone began a relentless series of vibrations. A cascade of emails and messages from his team flooded in, announcing new complications, project delays, agitated clients, and a crucial set of reports that were missing key data. Jason's brow furrowed, the familiar weight of responsibility settling back onto his shoulders. He looked at Emily, seeing the anxiety in her eyes, yet still the unwavering trust, and he swore to himself, "I can't abandon her, but I can't let my career collapse either." Emily sighed, leaning her head against his shoulder. You don't have to fix all of that right now. I'm here with you." A wave of warmth washed over Jason, but the fear remained. The job, the heavy responsibility, and now the growing shadows outside. None of it was truly over. The fragile quiet was abruptly shattered by the jingle of the shop bell. A terrified employee rushed toward them, whispering urgently, "Excuse me, there's a group of strange people outside, asking for a Jason." Jason and Emily exchanged a look of pure dread. Emily squeezed his hand. Who are they?" Jason took a deep breath, steeling himself. I don't know yet, but we need to prepare." Jason stood up, pulling Emily into a shadowy corner behind a tall bookcase. They peered through the glass front door, catching glimpses of blurred figures moving slowly, deliberately, outside. Jason's pulse accelerated, his breathing quickening. This wasn't just an emotional or professional test. It was turning into a genuine, immediate danger. Emily whispered, her voice laced with panic. "Jason, I'm scared." Jason gently stroked her hair, his voice low and firm. "I know, but we survived the rain, we survived the turmoil inside, and now, we face this together." They stood motionless for several tense minutes, listening to the rain and the calculated silence of the people outside. Jason realized that every decision, every action he had taken today, had a consequence. If he hadn't been fast enough, or sharp enough, both his work and Emily could have been compromised. Emily reached for his hand, her voice still trembling, but imbued with a fierce determination. "Jason, I trust you, but If we're going to continue this, we really have to get ready. Jason gripped her hand tightly. I promise. I won't let anything break us, whether it's rain, shadow, or any challenge. We move forward, together. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with shared anxiety and shared resolve. Outside the bookstore, the lingering shadowy figures served as a cold reminder that the fight wasn't finished, and their next steps would be the direct consequence of the choices they had made today. Emily leaned into Jason, letting out a measured sigh. I know, even though I'm scared, I want to be with you. Jason offered a small, fierce smile, his gaze still fixed on the window. And I want you with me. We'll face it all, holding on to each other, and to everything else that matters. In that moment, with the light rain falling and the old bookstore warm around them, Jason and Emily knew that the aftermath of this day was only the beginning, and the true storm was still waiting just beyond the glass. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the dusty bookstore window, bathing Jason and Emily's faces in a pale, hopeful glow. The rain had ceased, but the air still held a damp chill, a lingering reminder of yesterday's terrifying events. Jason took a slow, deep breath, feeling his heartbeat finally settle into a steady rhythm. He knew today was their chance for a reset to tackle the residual fallout, both professional and personal. Emily sat across from him, her hand still firmly holding his. Jason, yesterday was truly horrific. I want to start over. Jason looked deep into her eyes, absorbing the sincerity, the absolute trust she placed in him. Me too, Em. Everything today. We'll handle it step by step, together. Jason pulled out his phone, sifting through the deluge of work emails and messages. Despite the compounding issues, he felt fundamentally different. The pressure was still there. But now he had Emily by his side, and that presence brought a profound, unexpected sense of calm. He outlined his plan clearly, prioritize the most urgent fires, delegate tasks to his key colleagues, and ensure the company engine didn't stall completely, while Jason focused. Emily watched, her eyes shining with newfound resolve. You don't have to do it all alone. I'll be here, I'll help, even if it's just small things. Jason smiled, a wave of warmth spreading through him. I know, and that means more than you can imagine. They left the bookstore, walking out onto the now dry street. Jason led Emily to a different coffee shop, one quieter, less conspicuous, where he could handle business calls while they talked. As they walked, they kept their pace slow, hands linked, discussing the lingering emotions, the fear, the strain, but also the reinforced hope and conviction. Jason opened his laptop, diving into critical emails. Emily sat beside him, occasionally taking notes or gently reminding him to pause when the stress lines reappeared on his forehead. The pressure persisted, but they felt a new, formidable strength. They were facing it as a united front, no longer isolated. Midday, Jason sent a final confirmation to his team that the situation was, for now, under control, and a genuine sense of relief washed over him. He looked at Emily, his voice softened. Things are better today. Because of you, Emily smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder, and because of you, I feel calmer, too. But just as their smiles finally met, a strange text message from an unsaved number flashed on Jason's screen. Jason ... Yesterday isn't finished. Get ready. Jason's heart instantly slammed against his ribs. Emily noticed a sudden shift in his expression, her voice trembling as she asked, What is it? Jason squeezed her hand tightly. Another challenge. But this time, we're going to be more ready. All we need is each other. They sat there in the quiet cafe, the rain long gone, the sunlight weak but present, yet a fresh wave of tension gripped them. Jason realized that hitting the reset button didn't mean the crisis was over. It only meant they had the opportunity to prepare better, to become stronger, and to face whatever was coming next, both emotionally and physically. Emily whispered, her voice soft but resolute, Jason, no matter what happens, I'm not leaving you. Jason held her hand tighter, his eyes burning with renewed determination. I promise, I won't leave you, not now, not ever. But through the glass window, a faint, fleeting shadow lingered, a silent warning that the true storm had not passed, and the final challenge was yet to be met. Jason stood by the coffee shop window, his gaze fixed and strained on the outside world. The same shadowy figures from yesterday were now moving with slow, deliberate purpose. His heart hammered, blood rushing in his ears. This was no longer an emotional test. It was a real, immediate danger they had to confront. Emily stood right beside him, her hand gripping his, her eyes alight with fear but also resolute trust. Jason, I'm scared, she whispered. He squeezed her hand, his voice low but unshakable. I know, Em, but this time we do it together. We don't walk away from each other, and we don't walk away from this. They pushed through the door, stepping out onto the now dry street. Sunlight filtered through the trees, yet every step they took was charged with tension. Jason made the decisive move to confront the figures. He led Emily toward a larger avenue, where the streetlights were brighter and there was more civilian traffic. The strange group came into focus. 3 men with menacing silhouettes, their eyes locked onto Jason. One stepped forward. His voice, a cold, flat monotone. Jason, you thought yesterday was luck. Jason inhaled deeply, the fear mixing with a surge of courage. He knew this was the moment for reason and bravery, but Emily was there, his greatest source of strength. Emily tugged on his arm, her voice trembling but steady. Jason, we face them together, right? Jason nodded, his eyes blazing with commitment. Always, Emily. We don't break ranks. The 3 men advanced. Jason stepped slightly in front of Emily, his voice firm. We don't want trouble. Just stop. They did not. A brief, charged standoff hung in the air, the tension almost electric. Jason felt his heart thudding, but his resolve held firm. Suddenly, Emily placed her hand on Jason's shoulder, her voice a calm anchor. Look at them. Don't let them see your fear. We have each other. Jason took a deep, steadying breath, his eyes hardening. He stepped forward again, channeling his every ounce of courage into his words. If you want to fight, be ready for what comes next. But we are not running. A timeless moment stretched between them. The figures paused, assessing the Purgeson and Emily side by side, unwavering, and then slowly, deliberately, they retreated. The rain of yesterday, the job pressure, the raw fear all seemed to dissipate in that one profound moment of shared defiance. Jason let out a long, shaky exhale, looking at Emily, a small, genuine smile finally reaching his lips. Emily leaned against his chest, her voice trembling with emotion but filled with joy. Jason, we did it. Jason stroked her hair, his eyes warm with affection. We got through all of it. Even if the storm comes back, we stand firm. Together, they walked down the street, their hands tightly laced, the warm sunlight casting long, comfortable shadows on the lingering dampness. Jason realized that the greatest challenge wasn't the weather, the job, or the shadowy figures, but maintaining the faith and the love between them. And they had won. Emily looked up at Jason, her smile radiant. We're starting over, right? Jason nodded, his voice deep and reassuring. Absolutely. And this time, nobody gets between us. The story closed on that moment. Standing together on the street, bathed in warm light, the rain finished, but their hearts full of relief, happiness, and unwavering resolve. Jason and Emily knew life would bring more tests, but with each other, they were ready to face anything. And then, from a distance, a passing car horn blew, a reminder that the world outside was always moving. But they had learned the ultimate lesson. Love and trust were the powerful forces that could weather any storm.